All right, today I want to talk about Florida, the Sunshine State, get into cost of living and rent rates. Let's do it.
Walking home in the rain makes it easier to down the pain. Standing alone in place, watching that.
The Sunshine State gained an estimated 329,717 new residents between April 2020 and April 2021, according to reports from the state's Office of Economic and Demographic Research. A lot of people are pouring into Florida. Might have something to do with the pandemic and the draconian restrictions across the country. Florida was a little more open. So newcomers have poured in from all over. Florida was the #1 destination for relocating Americans in 2020. That's reports from move.org. They basically used internal metrics, U.S. Census Bureau data, and a poll fish survey of 700 U.S. adults to determine each state's popularity. So you're dreaming of moving to Florida, the home of Disney World, Universal Studios, airboats, alligators, the Kennedy Space Center, and some of the country's most beautiful beaches. They do have some really nice beaches. Don't forget about the humidity. I'm not a fan of that, but you can deal with it. And despite being one of the most popular vacation and retirement destinations in the U.S., Florida, it can be affordable. Just depends, like anything, what part you live in. It's not all the same. In fact, the average cost of living in Florida is not even 1% higher than the national average, and that's according to the cost of living index. But there's still a wide range. Some Florida cities rank roughly 8% lower to 18% higher in cost when compared to the average U.S. city. So, there's a range like anything. And take a look at this cost of living breakdown. If you delve into it, an amount below 100 means Florida has a lower cost of living than the average or the U.S. average for the particular category. For example, look at utilities and food expenses. So it's interesting how this kind of comes together when you do your research. In the summer of 2021, median home prices in Florida were more than $382,000, and just a tad lower than the national median of $385,000. Florida's effective property tax rate is 0.94%, is slightly below the national average, which is roughly 1.1 is the national average. Take a look at this breakdown, cost per city. #1, Miami coming in at $444,258. Then you got #2, Pensacola, #3, Orlando, #4, Tampa. Jacksonville coming in at $281,601. So that's interesting. Now, we looked at cost of living, price of houses, but unfortunately, it's a different story of rent. The median monthly rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida was more than $1,500, nearly 27% higher than the national median of $1,200. So, in an inexpensive city such as Miami, the median apartment rental is roughly around $1,915. However, in Tampa, the average apartment rent is about $1,647, and Jacksonville rental prices are quite similar. Orlando's average apartment rental prices are slightly higher, around $1,611. So it's interesting when you look at the different cities. Take a look at this chart that delves into the median rent breakdown when you look at the bedroom size per these places. So keep in mind, not all of Florida costs the same. When you consider total housing cost factors, Florida ranges all the way from 17% lower than the national average in Daytona, for example, in Daytona Beach, to 51% higher in Fort Lauderdale. We're very familiar with Fort Lauderdale. We've had people that have invested there and helped them out. We've also invested in Fort Lauderdale in the past. I'm going to do a video on Fort Lauderdale in the future. I'm looking at some things for a client in Miami. So I have been spending more time lately looking at rent rates in Miami area and homes. I've been there a few times. So I want to get more familiar with the Miami area. I did look at it when we were looking and invested in Fort Lauderdale. But in the last month, I've been researching Miami more. So that's part of the reason I want to do a video on this. The average rent for a Miami studio apartment is roughly $2,121. The average rent for a Miami one-bedroom apartment is $2,578. The average rent for a Miami two-bedroom apartment is $3,362. And the average rent for a Miami three-bedroom apartment is $4,399. So take a look at this chart. Miami rent trends, rent growth compared to the national. Miami rents have increased by 3.4% compared to last month. And, they're up by 25.96 compared to last year. So that's interesting. Look at this chart, Miami rent trends, inventory by average apartment rent. So we're looking at the inventory by average apartment rent. 1% of apartments in Miami cost less than $1,000 per month. 14% of apartments in Miami cost between roughly $1,000 and $1,099 per month, and 44% of Miami cost between $2,000 and $2,999 per month. 41% of apartments in Miami cost over $3,000 per month. So rents, if you're a landlord, are looking pretty good. Not cheap in some places, but affordable in others. If we also broke down, looking at the data, rent trends, Miami inventory by apartment type. So we look at the apartment type, studio, one bedroom, two bedroom, what have you. 12% of apartments in Miami are studio apartments. 41% of apartments in Miami are one bedroom apartments, and 34% of apartments in Miami are two bedroom apartments. And roughly 13% of apartments in Miami are three bedroom apartments. So it's good to know that, but something more importantly as well that you need to think about are taxes in Florida. A lot of people, the state tax, yes, but what are some of the things you need to worry about and think about? A lot of people outline about moving to Florida because, there's no state tax, right? And while it is true that there is not state income tax in Florida, it's important to understand how this will affect you individually. You see, for most average Americans, not having to pay income tax in Florida isn't going to result in significant savings for you. The people who benefit quite a lot are those who have extremely high incomes, can benefit from that. In this way, Florida is a tax haven for the wealthy, which is why many choose to move here or have a second home, and then they save. So, one of the reasons that Florida doesn't have state income tax is that the state, they generate a ton of money from tourism. And however, that doesn't mean that you won't be paying any taxes in Florida. In fact, while there is an overall low taxation at the state level, there is considerable taxation at the local levels in Florida. One of the first ways you will discover, and feel the pain, this is when moving to Florida, is the cost to register your cars. It can be shocking if you are not prepared for the fees and taxes. Hey, if you're from California, it's no big deal. No big deal for you. So while property taxes in Florida may be slightly lower than the rest of the U.S., gasoline taxes are about 0.34% per gallon in Florida compared to about 0.28% per gallon in Georgia. The sales tax rate in Florida is currently at about 6%, which is higher than states like Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan, and Maine, but lower in states like New York, of course, California, Arizona, and Tennessee. So keep that in mind. Check out the, there. I'll leave this website in the description. You can look at some comparables in states. So according to for state and federal income taxes, as well as Social Security contributions and Medicare payroll, the average adult working in Florida pays roughly $5,307 annually in taxes, below the national average of about $6,542. So the state is one of the only 9 nationwide that does not levy a tax on wages, which partially explains lower than average tax payments. Does that make sense? So in general, Florida tends to have lower wages and salaries. You need to keep that in mind. They have lower wages and salaries compared to many other U.S. states. And a lot of people don't realize that. Well, I'm going to save on my, no income tax, but you're going to get a lower salary compared to, let's say, maybe California or New York. So you need to look at that. And some other expenses that I looked into that you just need to consider in Florida. The one thing about moving to another state is that it can be challenging to anticipate the hidden cost of making the move. You need to look into the micro. These expenses are often completely forgotten about when creating a budget. Even worse, sometimes people assume that they're at a much lower rate than they should be. Bottom line is, you don't want to fall prey to these costs. And here are some additional costs, expenses to consider in Florida. Something to think about that you might just say, hey, no big deal. You have child care costs. Child care costs can be expensive in the state of Florida. The average annual cost of child care for a single child in the state is roughly $9,271.43. That rises to $18,542.86 for 2 children. According to the data, we talked about the sales tax, although I just want you to keep this in mind. Although Florida's sales tax rate is lower than some other states, it's still a significant 6%. That certainly makes a difference to your bank account, absolutely 100%. So keep that in mind. Additionally, some counties may add a percentage point or 2 to the tax rate. That can increase it substantially. So be sure to check your county's tax rate. We talked about the income tax. Florida doesn't have a state income tax rate. That's a real advantage to living in the Sunshine State. I talked about Texas. They don't have an income tax, but they get you on property taxes, which are almost $2,000 per 100,000. So $1 million house, you're going to be paying $25,000 a year in Texas. So in sum, knowing whether you can afford to live in Florida is crucial. If you are considering moving to Florida, it's crucial to figure out your budget beforehand. Florida is hard to compete with in terms of the sheer number of famed attractions, of course. If you're into that, just keep in mind that these attractions are generally expensive. So you got your entertainment budget. You need to factor that into and what you're going to do at night and go to dinner and what have you. I've been on and off in Florida. I lived there for a while for a company. We spent time there 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then invested at Fort Lauderdale. I like Florida. I don't know if I'd want to live there full time, but I do like some of their policies and how they're running the state. If you have a second home there, it's not a bad investment. I've dealt with some clients that wanted a second home from California and parts of the Midwest. So I'm just brushing up on my learnings about Florida because a lot of people that I'm working with, if I can't help them, I do put them in contact with some people that I have. We work with an agent out there that we trust and respect. That's very good at what he does. So I refer people to him, but I initially set things up and I know a lot about what's going on, and I'm just adding to my learnings, especially around Naples, spend time there, Sarasota, Fort Lauderdale. Like I said, we have business there and work with investors and invested, and then Miami. And I'm talking everything. The floodplains, I did a lot of research on that. There's a lot of things you need to know. The sea levels, and the building codes and all that stuff. So I really delved into the micro, and I'm going to continue to spend a little time every week at Florida because of the amount of sheer number of people moving there, and we're there, we're invested. So I think it's an interesting city. They're doing a lot of good things, but you need to keep the big picture and work it down. You hear no sales tax, but then your salary is probably going to be lower. So you have to look at all these things when you move there. And, you know, I'll focus another video about investing there, like different cities to invest in. But I think it's important right now. I'm working with a client who's looking to rent there, and then he's eventually going to buy. So I wanted to cover the rents and some of the cost of living in this video. Take care. Have a great week. Be kind. Ciao.